forced labor, and her father was eventually sent to the Isle of Man. Marge lived with her mother and grandparents, and their 11-member family was sent to Theresienstadt, which was a holding camp of Jewish people in the transit to extermination camps in the Czech Republic. There, only Marge and her mother survived. Afterwards, they were reunited with her father in England. When Marge was 15, the family immigrated to the United States, where she later met her future husband. They settled in Phoenix, Arizona, opened a restaurant, and built a successful life while raising a family. So please welcome Marge Rich to the microphone.
You can.
My experiences are many, and the things I can tell you are more than many. I really feel that I'm opening myself up again. I've spoken to quite a few groups, including Luke Air Force Base, to veterans, to various schools, and this is not a pretty story. It's not a story, it actually happened. I was 4 years old when we went into concentration camp. I was 8 years old when we managed to be liberated, and I was a refugee again in Bavaria, in a displaced persons camp. What I would like to tell you about is that we were waiting to be sent to concentration camp. We knew the day was coming, and one day right around dawn, the door was kicked open, and my mother was frantically trying to dress me in as much stuff as we had, which wasn't very many clothes as it was. And that day we had dreaded and we had feared, it came. And they dragged us out down the stairs with using their rifle butts to encourage us to move a little faster, though we couldn't really move much faster. And many old people were in that building. We had a one-room apartment with no bathroom, and we had a communal kitchen, and all the women took turns cooking there. We had nothing in our room except beds, and that's where I lived until I was 4. And after that, I heard that we were going to be transported. Everybody was talking about it, buzzing about it. It was pretty awful. My mother was so terrified, she tried to take her life. My uncle came and stopped her, and the thought of taking a little child into something like that was too much for her. So what happened was, the day that they dragged us out, there was army trucks waiting, and they lined us up 2 by 2 in long lines waiting to get on the trucks. And the ones that had babies, that were nursing babies that were hungry, the screaming and crying, those were the ones that were beaten with the rifle butts. And the older people couldn't get up onto the truck, so they were beaten to encourage them to. And we finally on the truck, and it was like so crowded, it was unbelievable. And they put us into cattle cars that still had the remains of the cattle in them. The smell was incredible, and it was still wet with urine and still full of cattle poop. I'm trying to be polite about it. And it was quite an ordeal. And we stood in that cattle car with no facilities for 3 days, driving across snow and snow. We didn't know where we were going or what was going to happen to us. I was terrified. I was glad my mother was there, but I'm short now. I was really tiny and I couldn't see what was going on at all, and I was crying and upset. And my mother said, "Don't be afraid. You're with me, and you're with your grandmother and grandfather and uncle, and we will not be separated. Don't be frightened." Finally, at 3 days, we came to a halt with lots of screeching brakes and things from the train, and just to breathe fresh air. My mother managed to get me off the train, which was so crowded, and we were filthy with our own urine and our own feces, and there was no restroom or anything. And as we were led outside, the Germans, realizing how disgusting we were, hosed us down with cold water. It was very, very cold there in Czechoslovakia. That's where we were. We were going to Theresienstadt, which is the name of the prison that we were in. And as they hosed us down, the clothes froze on our backs. And it was quite cold and miserable. And I couldn't get enough of the fresh air, and I kept breathing it in and breathing it in. And I was so glad when we finally came to a stop. Then I realized, as little and as young as I was, they were separating the men from the women. And they made various lines, and we were not going to a death camp like Auschwitz. We were going to a work camp, a model camp, where there was a big sign, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. As we were not a death camp, we didn't have the ovens, and we didn't have the gas chambers, but we did have soldiers with machine guns. Anyway, when we got off the train, the SS were on the roof of the train, pointing machine guns at us, as if we were going to escape. Some hope was that. And after that, we were inspected. We were lined up again. My mother was here, my grandmother was here, I was in the middle. I managed to fade in behind them, just carrying my little teddy bear. And he's very old, I still have him. He lives on my dresser. He's very old, he's about 100. Anyway, I had him with me the whole time, and I still have him. So that's neither here nor there. I'm digressing, I know. And so we were put on some more trucks and taken to under the sign into the camp. And that's where we were put into this huge hall, and with triple tiered bunks. And my grandmother was on top, my mother was on the bottom, and I was supposed to be in the middle. There were no mattresses or anything. We got a very thin blanket that had been somebody's before us. It wasn't thick or anything, it was just worn out. And so we spent the first night there, and there was lots of babies crying and a lot. Then it came again, 5 o'clock. We had to be at the parade ground, and we had to have breakfast. And breakfast consisted of a cup of coffee. Starbucks wouldn't have it. And it with some debris floating in it, and a slice of bread. If you were lucky, it wasn't moldy or stale. That was breakfast. And then they took some more people and put them on the train, and those were going to Auschwitz. Those were mothers nursing babies. Those were old people who couldn't work. Those were the sad people. And we never, of course, saw them again, and lived in that hall. And it was pretty horrendous, since children were not allowed then. I was 4. I was gonna be 5 in the camp, but I was 4 at the time. Since children couldn't work and were useless, very useless, they were just sent to Auschwitz and terminated. We felt terrible. I had to hide. My mother every single day had to tell me. She had to go to work. She worked in a factory making windshields for German warplanes. And she worked 18 hours a day, and I never knew if I was gonna see her again, if she would come home that night. People had a tendency to disappear, but she did come home, thank God, because otherwise I don't know what would have happened to me. And basically that's it. I'm open for questions.
We're doing questions after everything.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Marge, for sharing. I know it's not easy to bring these memories up, but it's so important that the future generations remember. So thank you so much for sharing and for your bravery. And we'll open up questions at the end for Marge.